All right. We're coming off one of the best weeks of the year in the cash-based clinic world because last week was the live event for PTBiz. They host these events biannually. I've been going to these events since 2021, and I've always come off of these events super hot and ready to work. This year's a little bit different because this is the first event where I'm no longer a clinic owner. But I do remember when I was a clinic owner and how important it was to define how to take a handful of things and implement those things. Because when you're at these events, it can feel like you're drinking from a fire hose because there's so many awesome presentations. You're having awesome conversations with people, trying to figure out what people are doing. There are just so many things going around, and you want to implement everything as a clinic owner. If you try to implement everything, that's going to mean that you're going to implement nothing. So you cannot do that. Instead, what you have to do is you have to pick a couple things to do over the next quarter and execute on those couple things. Do not get shiny object syndrome. Do not try to implement on everything. So, what you need to do is you need to find out what are the three things that are going to move the needle the most for you in your business over the next 3 months and only stick to those things. So, in today's podcast, what I'm going to go over is what my three biggest takeaways were from the week and talk about how you should implement these things for your clinic. So I think the first thing that one of my biggest takeaways from the week was that going back to the fundamentals, to be totally honest with you, and making sure that of the fundamentals of running a business, making sure you're still doing this. So I might be talking a little bit more to the newer business audience here, but I think this stuff can get lost with some of the bigger businesses as well. So this is always a good reflect of if you're a bigger business and you're trying to grow, you're trying to scale, but you're getting away from some of the fundamentals. I think this can be relevant for the bigger businesses as well. But for the most part, this is going to be for the smaller businesses. I think when you go to these events, it's really easy to hear about like how somebody's running paid advertising and it's absolutely crushing. Or this clinic is using all of these automations and these fancy AI tools to link together all of this stuff and create all of this customization in these automations. Or somebody's utilizing this new SEO strategy that's generating all of this one site content. Like all of these like high level things are awesome, but if you're not doing the fundamentals of running your business, none of that fancy stuff matters. It's if you're a basketball player, right? You can be the showiest basketball player out there. You can be doing all the fancy dribbles and the moves and the drives to the rim, but if you can't effectively throw a bounce pass or shoot a free throw, none of that stuff actually matters. And while I was at the event, I talked with a lot of business owners, and a lot of them weren't doing some of these key things. One of those is just like simply following up with patients. We had a lot of people, we had a booth up at the event where it was myself and a handful of our patch employees, and we were talking about marketing and SEO and paid advertising. And people were coming to us for that magic wand marketing campaign that they can run. And when I actually started talking to some of these business owners, and drilling into a little bit more on what is their current marketing strategy, most of them were not even, they didn't have a process in place to actually follow up with patients. So it's, when somebody inquires, so somebody fills out a form on your website, or if they come in for a workshop, or if they call you, what is the SOP behind that? And how are you following up with somebody when they inquire? Before you start running paid advertising, that's something that you need to have nailed down and SOP'd out. Same thing when somebody comes in for an evaluation. Are you sending a follow up email after that evaluation to make sure that they come in for their first session of their package? Because a lot of the clinic owners I were talking to were having a hard time on the compliance side of things, but they weren't doing a very simple email after the evaluation just to recap that eval, send over a handful of exercises. And even I was having conversations about the online coaching tool that somebody can use and just getting somebody to log into True Coach or Train Heroic or whatever the newest app is out there. And if you're not sending an email about the login instructions after the evaluation to get their AGPs, people aren't going to just see a True Coach email coming in and understand what to do with that. Just a simple follow up email after that evaluation I think in the cash based world, we need to take our service and elevate it to the nth degree. And sending these personalized follow up emails that take a little bit more time, that is super important to do. Same thing along these lines of the follow-up email after the evaluation is a follow-up during just like the package process. I used to harp on my employees to make sure that they're for within their say somebody comes in and they buy a 10 pack of sessions. How often are they following up throughout that 10 pack of sessions and sending those touch point emails to somebody after the 10 pack? I think the more follow-up and the more value you're providing outside of that session, the more likely that somebody is to come in and continue working with you and continue paying out of pocket for your services. But if you're not doing that and you're just relying on the communication in session and you're not sending follow up check in emails to see how things are going, I think that's a problem. And I think it's going to be really hard to get somebody to convert into continuity. I think like a 12-week check-in email is a non-negotiable. I think that's something that has to happen. Usually what I like to tell clinic owners is at the 12-week mark, your staff PTs or you should be sending basically like a re-eval note to the patient that says, "Hey, listen, like you've been in for 3 months. Do you remember when you came in and you couldn't even squat or you couldn't even bend down because of your back pain? Now look at you, like we're RDLing 50 pounds or whatever it might be. And then talking about, hey, here's what the next 3 months after this looks like. So you're almost pre-framing that continuity. You're having a really nice touch point with the patients. You're showing your value, and it's going to make that continuity way easier to convert on. And again, like if you're looking at like the next thing for marketing, but you're not sending that follow-up check-in email, you if you're doing these check-in emails and you're getting people to convert into continuity, you don't need to go and find that new employee or the new employee, new evaluation to come in the door because you already have these people here. And if you can get people to continue buying, then the number of leads and evaluations you have in the door, it doesn't really matter. And if you're a bigger business, you need to make sure your employees are doing this. You need to track this stuff. We did this all through our HubSpot, our CRM account. Very easy to set up, and I think a crucial thing to do. One thing is talking about fundamentals. Simple follow up and touch points with patients are huge. I think another thing that I saw a lot of on the fundamentals side of things is a lot of clinics just weren't marketing. They were getting out there and doing a handful of workshops for sure, but I think the importance of marketing really wasn't stressed. And I think luckily for a lot of clinic owners, our product and the cash-based 60-minute one-on-one sessions is just so different than what's out there in the insurance world that if people come in and they start experiencing how good we are on the clinical side of things, to begin with, marketing really doesn't matter because word's going to get out there. People are going to come in, people are going to stick around, and your schedule is going to get busy. But so many people that I talk to were looking at marketing almost as like a secondary thing for the clinic. It's the lifeblood of your clinic. And without marketing, you really don't have a business. I think it's one of the most important things to do. So you got to be out, you got to get out there, you got to be doing your face to face meetings. You need to be doing your workshops, your local marketing. If you're really looking to grow, you need to be advertising. You need to be okay with spending money on paid advertising. You need to be sending email campaigns. You need to be writing weekly newsletters. And you need to be doing all of these things. This is the most important part of your business. And if you're looking at your clinic as a business, as a vehicle to make money versus a clinic where, you want to be the best physical therapist, then that's how you're going to grow the most. And don't get me wrong, and don't take it the wrong way. I think the clinical side of things is very important. I think our product is super important. But as a business owner, you need to look more at the sales and marketing side of growing the business than taking another continuing education course. And again, if you like that clinical side of things, that's awesome. You should lean into that. And you can hire somebody like us at Patch where we can handle all of that marketing stuff for you. And then you can just do some of the lean into the clinical education side of things. I think, all clinic owners, and this is something that I did when I was running Ripple, was I held myself to what's called the rule of 100. This is basically 100 reach outs every single day. It's a combination of paid ad spend and following up with patients and reaching out to leads and reaching out to local referrals. That's a whole other podcast talking about the rule of 100, something I'll probably get into at a later date, but making sure that this is part of your day. You need to have marketing as part of your everyday tasks. This is a very important thing. And again, just a fundamental that you need to remember. I think the last thing, a very simple fundamental, is trying to build your business through referrals in Google reviews and actually like having a process in place to ask for those referrals and reviews. I think we had a lot of people because we run a Google review campaign for people inside of Patch if they want to run it, and it's super successful. Basically, we raffle something off and we do a whole email marketing campaign around that. We usually get 50 or 60 Google reviews from that one marketing campaign, which is awesome. And word got out about that. And we had a lot of people come and ask us about that marketing campaign that we put together. But when I put it back on a lot of people that I was speaking with, they just didn't even have a plan in place to get Google reviews. And maybe they were sending out one text or one email, but there's no follow up process in place. And there's no way of systemizing asking people for this, asking people for a Google review. Same thing on the referral side of things of when somebody's really happy or they mention how good they're feeling or how awesome this service has been, ask them, be like, "Hey, I'm so glad that you're having an awesome experience with us. Do you have any friends or families that are like you that could benefit from our services? We would love to have them in at a discounted evaluation. At Ripple, we always gave those evals out for free because those are warm leads and I want to get as many of those people in the door." But again, fundamental is just very simply having a process in place where you're asking for your Google reviews, you're asking for referrals coming in. And I think, again, it's very easy to overlook these fundamentals, but I think there are things that need to be done and need to be readdressed every couple quarters or so. The next takeaway I had was from the bigger businesses that I was interacting with that had staff PTs. And that takeaway was really in order to properly manage staff PTs, you need to have very clear expectations for them. And I'm saying this with experience of when I first hired my first couple PTs, we did not have these things in place and it was very willy nilly. And I was very lucky where my staff PTs were like moral individuals and they weren't collecting a salary and not working as hard as possible. So I got really lucky there. And they were so busy that I didn't really need to have any sort of metrics in place because everybody was out straight and they were doing a really good job of converting and we could just feel how busy they were in the clinic. So there was a period of time during when I was running Ripple where I didn't have these clear expectations for staffs in place. But as we continue to grow, having these expectations became more and more important. So for the first thing, what you need to do for your staff PTs is you need to have roles and responsibilities very clear and everybody needs to be on the same page. So when we were sending out our job descriptions and within everybody's roles and responsibilities, I mapped out expectations on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and on a quarterly basis. And everybody was very clear on what needed to be done every single day, every single week, every single month, every single quarter. So that when we met with our staff PTs, when we were doing our weekly meetings, we went over all of the weekly tasks and it's very black and white of did you do what you were expected to do this week? If not, why? If you did, awesome, cool, let's move on. Same thing when we had our monthly meetings. These were looking at a little bit more on the metrics side of things of how many sessions did you do this month? What was your conversion rates for evaluations? What were your conversion rates for continuity? Are you on track to hit what you're supposed to be this quarter? Again, very clear, very black and white because we had all of these things mapped out. Same thing again on the quarterly basis. Quarterly basis is a little bit bigger of a meeting. You're having your quarterly meeting with your staff members. This is talking about overall performance and making sure that metrics were hit. The quarterly meeting, I think a lot of clinic owners will leave feedback and actioning on productivity in the quarterly meeting. Whereas like in the monthly meetings, these things should be caught. You shouldn't be giving feedback or being like, yo, you're way under productivity metrics this quarter. And that's the first time they're hearing about it. So having these very clear expectations for staff becomes really important. Having a scorecard is really important. So again, what I look for at Ripple, and you guys take these metrics with a grain of salt and implement that as you would want to for your own business. But I looked at it as I wanted 105 sessions to happen per month. I wanted a 70% conversion rate on the evaluation, and I wanted a 40% continuity rate. So 40% of people, of patients that worked with us, then purchased continuity. Those are my super high level things that I looked at. We obviously looked at time that it took for somebody to fulfill on package, how many people had fallen off, et cetera, et cetera. But if you want to be very clear and have proper expectations with your staff members, I think this is a really good place to start. And this is where having something like HubSpot to track these things becomes really important and keeps things really clear because we can pull the data up. And if you feel like a staff member is underperforming, but you don't have the actual metrics to back it up, or there's not a very clear metric or bar defined, it becomes really hard to reprimand or enforce anything on a staff member that you think is underperforming. So this is where you need to have these things happen. There were clinics that had staff members go onto PIPs, improvement plans, and this clinic itself like had all of their stuff put together. So they were tracking these things very diligently. It was very clear. This was not something that was just brought up at a quarterly meeting. It was talked about on a monthly basis, a weekly basis, and the staff member just wasn't meeting expectations on the evaluation and the continuity percentage. And they had all those metrics. They had talked about it for a couple quarters. And the only way that they were able to put this staff member on a PIP was because they had all of these conversations and these metrics were very clear. But if you're a clinic and you have a staff member and you're not actively talking about these things or tracking these things, and you have a staff member that you feel is underperforming, they're not generating enough revenue for the clinic or to justify their salary, then it's going to be really hard to potentially fire that staff member or even like to put ourselves into that staff member's shoes. They don't really they don't know that they're underperforming because it's not communicated properly to them. So having these specific roles, responsibilities, and metrics clearly defined is really important. If you're a clinic and you're starting to hire or you have hired and you're not doing these things, this is extremely important. If you want excellence, then you need to define what excellence is, and then you need to enforce it on a consistent cadence. So that was a really big takeaway that I had. And I think that's something that all clinics can learn from. The last takeaway was how important the customer journey is. So at the event, there was a keynote speaker and he was amazing. He was a vet owner and had sold a handful of practices. Basically, what this speaker did was he did a secret shopping through a local cash-based clinic that was in his area. And he took us through his process of defining what the customer journey is and grading that customer journey based on all of the steps in the customer journey. I think one of the important lessons that I took from this was I think we all look at the customer journey or what we're doing as business owners or clinicians, right? So we're doing what's best for the business or as a clinician. And we're not actually looking at the booking process or the follow up process or the session process or how our clinic is set up as the patient. So it was a good step back reminder for me of, all right, let's put ourselves in the customer's shoes and let's make this process as easy as possible for the customer versus always looking at things as the business owner or as the clinician. So basically, what the speaker talked about was all of the steps that a patient goes through, the pre-booking process. How easy is it for somebody to book? What that booking process looked like? What would the arrival was? What would the session look like? What was the follow-up? And then what was the re-engagement? And just drill down on each one of those. And what he did was he gave a sliding scale of each and defined each process with a word, like a feeling that he felt as the potential in booking patient so that you could take that as a business owner and then implement changes based on what that feeling was. So Again, looking at starting from step one of the pre-booking process, how do you find a physical therapy clinic? So if we're putting ourselves in a patient's shoes, and if you don't have a friend of a friend that's going to physical therapy, or you know somebody who works at a physical therapy clinic, chances are what you're doing during that pre-booking process is you're going to Google and you're typing into Google best physical therapist near me. And then what you want to do, and I suggest you do this, or you hire somebody to be your secret shopper and go through this process. But what you want to see is if you type that into Google, where does your clinic and where does your blue link show up when you type that into Google? Are you running Google ads so you show up at the top? Do you have really good SEO so you're showing at the top? Is your Google My Business profile optimized so that when somebody goes to the maps that you're at the top there? That's a really important part because if you're on the third or fourth page, nobody's finding you, and that pre-booking process is going to be borderline impossible unless you're coming from a word of mouth referral. So that's why running Google Ads is so important, and doing it properly is so important. Again, if you guys need help with that, just let me know. This is what we do best. So, okay, say somebody eventually finds you, they're on Google. Then what happens is they go to your website, right? So this is going to be stage two in all of this, which is the booking process. How clear is your website on what that next step is that I need to take in order to schedule an evaluation? I really like pushing people towards a discovery call here. What I thought was really interesting, and the keynote speaker found that he was super excited. He wanted to schedule an evaluation right off the bat. And this website was really pushing towards for somebody to schedule a discovery call. And he described it as it was Friday morning and there wasn't a discovery call available until Monday, which he was bummed about. And that on his sliding scale of grading brought him down a little bit. So what I took from that was your discovery call availability has to be almost at all times, or having Saturday morning availability or Sunday availability open, because I think this happens with a lot of people of they get at the beginning of the week trying to book a physical therapy appointment isn't going to happen because they're busy and there's loads of things going on. But when Thursday, Friday rolls around, or maybe works a little bit slower, you have a little bit more time, you're going to be like, oh yeah, my back is killing me. Let me find physical therapy clinic nearby. That's when you go to Google. That's when you try to book a discovery call. And I think a lot of clinics, when they're doing this, they don't have much availability Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday because it's their weekend as well. But that's when the most discovery calls are booked. So you need to make sure that every day of the week you have at least a couple open slots available. The next part of this process was the arrival process. And I thought he brought up a really awesome point here. When you show up to the clinic, you really need to understand, you really need to like tap into like your five senses, right? So it's what do you smell when you walk into the clinic? What are you looking at when you get in there? What are you hearing? These are all things that you need to, again, look at your clinic as the patient and try to see like how easy is that process? And this is something that I really loved diving into these five senses at arrival for Ripple. So I'm going to do another podcast on this as well. But again, put yourself in your patient's shoes, walk into your clinic, and is it confusing on what they need to be doing? What is the smell? What are the sights? Is somebody there greeting them? Really put yourself through that process and try to optimize it as well as possible. And then the next three, obviously, we're getting into the actual session itself. So, how well did the sales process go? What did the sessions look like? What was the follow up on the sessions? One of the important things that he brought up here was he got 3 sessions in, his shoulder felt better. And he was like, I don't think he bought a 10 pack to begin with. And he got 3 sessions in, felt better, and was like, what do I do with the rest of these 7 sessions? The therapist that he was secret shopping on didn't do a great job of talking about, hey, yes, we're going to get your shoulder out of pain as soon as possible. We're doing 10 sessions because we're going to really lean into what you want to do on the CrossFit end. And we're going to get into some performance training. And we need to do all of these things. And it's going to take us at least 10 sessions to do these things. So you're going to feel better quick, but also setting the groundwork for we're going to be leaning into the performance side of things. And that's why we need all of these 10 sessions. And then the last part of all this is like just the re-engagement. So he mentioned like he didn't get asked for a Google review or asked to send a referral over or continue working with them in any sort of capacity. So just ensuring that you're re-engaging people and you're keeping them, you're actively continuing to entertain and delight them throughout that whole sales process because at the end of the day, we want them to continue buying with us. So again, looking at from the moment where somebody realizes that they have a problem and they start searching for a solution to that problem, all the way to when their problem is solved and how do we keep them around to continue buying us and grade yourself on all those levels. I loved that he was looking at himself as a secret shopper. We used to do this at Ripple as well. Whenever we hired a new PT, I would have one of my buddies or we would have a local personal trainer or somebody along those lines. They would come in and they would come in for an evaluation and work with this new PT. The new therapist had no idea that we knew who this person was. They thought it was a legit evaluation. They took it very seriously. And we were able to get like really good feedback on how good are they at sales? How good are they at understanding how to lean into the figuring out the why that somebody's in there? What was the actual like clinical side of the evaluation? How did that go? How was manual, et cetera, et cetera. And then they actually had to sell a package at the end of that. And we got really awesome feedback. It also built the confidence of our staff PTs as well. So I think for you guys, implementing this into your own practice is really important. There's nothing I think more important than the customer journey. This is something I used to obsess over when I was running Ripple. I had whiteboards on Figma boards, trying to map all of this stuff out. And it's really why I leaned into investing in HubSpot and building out our CRM, because without one, it's really impossible to have all these touch points and do a really good job with all these customer journey touch points. So if you're a clinic owner and you don't have a process for all of this, please reach out. This is exactly what we do for you at Patch. I think overall, those are obviously three big takeaways that I had. And I think a lot of people will hear this and think it's some sort of knock or a bad thing that they're missing some of these things, but it's not at all. This is how business works. You have to continuously get better. And when I attend events like these, whether it's the PTBiz event or other business groups that I'm working with, this is what I'm looking for. I'm trying to figure out what people that are ahead of me are doing that I'm not and how I can start to implement those things into my business. If I went to events and it was always just like reiterating how good I'm doing and, oh yeah, I'm doing all of this stuff, and I wasn't actually taking something new or finding things that I wasn't doing super well, then that's not a good place to be. You always want to be learning, you always want to be implementing. My suggestion to you is over the next 3 months, take two or three things and figure out what you're going to focus on, and then what based on what you're going those two or three things that you're going to focus on this quarter, figure out how you're going to take that step to accomplishing them over the next month. And then based on what you're doing that month, figure out what you need to do this week. And based on what you need to do this week, figure out what you need to do on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, et cetera, in order to get these done. Because if you just look at this big goal that you need to get done by the end of the quarter, and if we're talking Q2, we're talking April, May, June, so end of June, that's a really daunting task. But if you take that big goal that needs to be done by the end of June and you just distill it down by what do I need to do today in order to take that first step to getting it done, it becomes much easier. And this is how you actually get shit done, is by breaking it down day by day, week by week, month by month. So hopefully this is helpful. And if it was, please make sure to subscribe to the pod.